Taoiseach, I think you would agree that the greatest thing about our state examination system at junior certificate and at leaving certificate is its absolute objectivity and transparency. Every child, irrespective of background, is treated and assessed equally. And I would agree with what Fintan O'Toole said yesterday in the Irish Times, that, and I quote, "it is as close to being incorruptible as anything gets in Ireland," unquote. So therefore, Taoiseach, changing such a system, even at junior certificate level, merits the most careful of consideration. And I understand where teachers are coming from in their concerns about this, because this is a major and genuinely major change in terms of assessment and will have an impact on the student-teacher relationship. Of that there can be no doubt. And I think it's also fair to put on the record that over the last 10 years there have been significant reforms, both at junior leaving certificate, at junior certificate, the introduction to science, new science syllabus, introduction of project maths, group work at CSP and so on. So it's not that people are always against reform. They've embraced reform and reform has happened. And I think the problem here, Taoiseach, is that the former Minister Rory Quinn caused a lot of bad feeling when he ignored the recommendations of the National Council for Curriculum Assessment. He announced a new model unilaterally, without consultation, and would not engage with the trade unions. So a lot of doubt and bad feeling was created. Now, I think Minister O'Sullivan has acknowledged that, to be fair, in her announcement, by reverting back to the original proposals of the NCCA, and now there'll be a state certificate exam, final exam, state certification for 60% and 40% in terms of projects and portfolios. But the fundamental point I would make, Taoiseach, is this, and parents are very concerned about this as well. In a survey, about 60% of parents said they didn't want teachers correcting their own pupils' work. So there's a lot of issues about this. The Minister has put in a precondition and has said that that's her final position. She's not going to engage in talks unless the teachers accept this 60-40 divide. There's no detail in terms of external moderation. There's no substance behind it, and I can understand the scepticism of teachers in relation to it. So what I would ask you, Taoiseach, is to remove that precondition. Say to the Minister for Education, engage in talks with the unions without condition. And I think that could prevent a strike happening next Tuesday. We don't need strikes next Tuesday on this issue. If there's an acceptance all round that there are very serious issues at play here, and all stakeholders must be brought on board. But that's the fundamental point I would put to you, Taoiseach. Would that precondition be removed to ensure meaningful talks can take place on this issue?
Thank you. Taoiseach.
First of all, I regret that the teachers intend to have a strike here. The only people who suffer from a strike in a circumstance like this are the students and the pupils. And this is about pupils. And what's involved here, as you are well aware, is to provide the most comprehensive and the best rounded education that young people can have before they enter, a competitive and an evolving work environment in a few short years. And that's why it's been necessary to look at the concept of the junior certificate, what it stands for, how it's structured, what it means, what progress it can give to young people in secondary school. I think it was proposed by your own party to abolish the junior cert at one stage. Now, for over 30 years, there's been agreement on the need to reform the first 3 years of second-level education. That was first proposed by the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment back in 1999, actually. The current junior certificate has its strengths, undoubtedly, but it can't allow for assessment of skills like teamwork, communications or creativity, which are all important in today's world. They're aspects of a modern society, and they're crucial skills that young people need to have. Everybody here, I'm sure, agrees that we want the best for our young people. So the new junior cert will allow students to study short courses in a range of areas that are relevant to their futures. I think that's an issue about devolution of responsibility to schools, which has generally been accepted. Some of these short courses will include things like Chinese language and culture, or coding. Again, skills and knowledge that are of increasing importance in the future. That's obviously something being requested by schools themselves. They will be able to develop their own short courses. priority junior certificate changes in areas like creativity, teamwork and problem solving. They cannot be assessed by written examination, as you're aware. And so the plan is for a reduction from 100% of marking to 40% of marks, and they'll be awarded for portfolio work, for oral skills, for project work, ways of assessing learning that are much broader than just written examinations. Deputy Martin is well aware that in Scotland, in Finland, in Australia, in New Zealand, all countries with very high-performing school systems, state exams at the end of the junior cycle have either been abolished completely or been replaced with a combination of exams and coursework assessed within the school. Now, since her appointment, Minister Sullivan has been very clear that she's been willing, account holder, to listen to all of the voices in education and to compromise where she felt this was necessary. She did involve herself in detailed discussions. Dr. Travers, the former president of St. Patrick's College, Drumcondra, was appointed as a chairman. But Minister Sullivan offered a compromise here. She said that 60% of the marks in the junior cycle should be allocated on the basis of an exam at the end of the third year, down from 100%, which will continue to be set and marked by the State Examinations Commission for all subjects, and that 40% of the marks should be allocated for school-based work, like portfolios, like projects, which thousands of students do at third-level colleges every other week.
Thank you.
And that work will be marked by the class teacher, who is in a much better position to provide detailed feedback to a student, as they do in woodwork or metalwork in schools all over the country today, to help them learn from the assessment of work. And the NCCA will set out the tasks that should be completed, give guidance to teachers on marking of that. I think that this is something that is very, very feasible to achieve. And I know myself from visiting schools all over the country that teachers work very closely on project work and assessment of that with students every day. There's nothing different here. 60% marked by the state examinations and 40% for project work and continued assessment. Very important for young people, and their teachers know them best. So in the interest of the pupil, in the interest of reform here, Minister Sullivan's gone a long way, and I would ask again that you don't have a strike on this, because the only people who suffer are the students.
Deputy.
The bottom line here is the assessment model. No one has any issue with reform. There's been reform for the last 10 years. Curriculum changes on an ongoing basis. But by the way, curriculum change needs to be backed up by detail, by substance, by comprehensive resourcing. None of that is on the table. There's absolutely no detail in relation to the 40% in terms of assessment of portfolios and projects. If you look at a leaving certificate, for example, in subjects like history, 20% can be allocated to project work or to a portfolio. But that is assessed externally at leaving certificate level. Now, I think people, if there's proper engagement, from day one, the government attempted to ram this through without consultation or without any engagement. That was the problem. Now, I accept that Minister O'Sullivan has moved away from that approach and has moved in a direction. But there should be no preconditions, Taoiseach, in terms of meaningful negotiations and working through these particular issues.
Thank you.
Because it's that sort of dictatorial, arrogant approach, which has been the hallmark of the government, that leads to these conflict situations and strikes where we don't actually need them. And I think, Taoiseach, teachers are well aware of what's being proposed, but they're not aware of any detail at all in relation to the 40%. And the countries that you mentioned have externally moderated systems, except not externally assessed in some of it. But that external moderation is very comprehensive, very well resourced, and significant training gone in behind it. And there's been a complete absence of any of that in relation to this issue. Now, our Deputy McConnell has been very constructive on this issue as an opposition spokesman for quite some time. But he has identified many of the weaknesses over the last 2 years in terms of how you've approached this. And there's no let-up now in terms of the manner that you've answered my question. I would appeal to you, Taoiseach, with the Minister for Education, to go back to the drawing board and engage in a respectful way with the trade unions on this issue and with the members, so that we can have all stakeholders on board in terms of meaningful reform to the learning and teaching process.
Taoiseach.
Yeah, but you're wrong, Deputy Martin, when you say that there were preconditions set down here. Minister O'Sullivan, on her appointment as Minister for Education, actually said that she was willing to listen, to engage and to involve with everybody involved here. She did appoint Dr. Travers as chairman of the talks, of the timetable for the talks, former president of St. Patrick's College Drumcondra. But the terms of reference were all proposed and accepted by Minister Sullivan. They were proposed by the unions, not by the Minister. It's not true to say that there were preconditions set down or that this was being bulldozed through. The terms of reference were proposed by the unions. Deputy Martin, and they were accepted by Minister O'Sullivan. She did appoint, as I said, Dr. Travers to do this. The previous proposals were that the teachers would be responsible for marking 100% of the work of the students throughout the junior certificate, and that's now changed. 60% marked by the State Examinations Board, and the 40%, and you know this, that teachers know their students best of all from the education point of view.
Thank you.
And if you let me finish, the NCCA will set out in detail the work that should be completed by each student, and they'll give guidance to teachers on the marking. Now, go out to any of the schools at the moment where students are doing project work, and they want to make the coffee table, or they want to make the press, or the
Sorry,
table.
would you stay quiet,
and the discussions that take place between the students and the teachers know the range and the capacity of each student here, and they can give guidance based on what the NCCA will set out as to how best this work should be completed. And they know this thing best, and it is for that kind of project work that 40% of the marks go, and that's eminently achievable by the teachers. So you're wrong when you say there were preconditions. You're wrong when you say she bulldozed it through. You're wrong in not understanding. You are wrong in not understanding that the propositions were put forward by the unions and accepted by the Minister, and following those discussions, and you never listen, following those discussions, the system was changed from 100% of marking required by teachers to 60% by the State Examinations Board and 40% by the teacher for those project works and assessment works which teachers know their students best.